Look at this. There's an issue. Short people cause trouble too. Thank you, Jai. That was beautiful. Okay, let's have a little transition. Let's stand up. And again, let's inhale, tense and vibrate. Throw the breath out. And again. Okay, now is there a camera in the house? We want to take a shot of our auras now and see if there's been any effect. Don't tell Jaya, though, of this exercise. He'll get mad at us. Okay, please be seated. I'm sure Jaya will be mobbed afterwards for these statements he's made about this, camera. Who knows? That was very bold of you. Very good. Okay. Well, the Guru. Guru, dispeller of darkness. Some time back, my brother, who was an artist, a very fine artist, he's passed on now. And I forget how long ago it was, maybe 6 to 8 years ago, we were talking together. And he began sharing, from his heart what he thought about the Guru. And perhaps he changed once he got up to heaven about his thoughts. But he wasn't so keen on the Guru. And so finally I said to him, because I had had enough and I thought it was going to be impolite to put my earplugs in. He was my older brother and so forth. But I thought that he was not quite on the right track about all these things he was saying. And I had listened politely for a few minutes. And finally I said, something? I said, you're a fine artist. And I know nothing about artwork. And if I were to all of a sudden get into Van Gogh's technique, and Van Gogh, when we think of Van Gogh, then can we start to think about Picasso and how, what are their different means of, putting the paint on the canvas, on and on. Then at one point, you would want to insert your earplugs too. Because you said, no, you just don't have the training. I was raised, with him as my older brother with stacks of these art books, and I loved to look through them. It was wonderful. And so I said, I know nothing about art, and excuse me, but you don't know anything about the Guru. You just don't know what you're talking about. And I think that was the end of the conversation. I think my mother said, lunch, boys. And that was that, because, harmony in the home is so very important. Well, there is quite a lot of misunderstanding about the Guru. And as Yogananda pointed out, the very strong thought is that if we were to give to another our will and our power and all those things, then what would we have left? We'd be an empty shell, we'd be a robot, we'd be a marionette to the whims of this other individual. But as Yogananda pointed out, that thought, which is an error that we would lose our freedom, he says that's exactly what they don't have. Because we don't realize that really, in so many ways, we have gurus. We have many gurus. We have, the gurus of our environment, and we have the gurus of our likes and dislikes, and it goes on and on and on and on. The subtotal of it, if we don't look out, is that we're getting ourselves on the wrong track, and we're starting to spiral downward, because this Maya is very, very potent. I remember some time back reading, and I'm forgetting where, but it was simply that a soul going into a superconscious state could fall asleep going into that state. And I thought, I had a lot of respect for the power of the Maya. I think I have even more. And I thought to myself, I suspect that is possibly true. Because why would this great hobby of God, this great delusion, why would it give up at the end? You know, we're beginning to go into higher and higher states. Okay, I guess they won, and let me go torment somebody else instead. Right to the very end, perhaps, we may have these tests. And so for us, really, whether we have a guru or not, it's good to reflect that there are many gurus, and we are influenced, in other words, back to magnetism. We're influenced inwardly. We are influenced outwardly. And it's why Yogananda said, if you want to be happy, make good choices. And I thought, wow, that is so simple and so wise. And of course, if we want to be unhappy, then fill in the blank. So what happens naturally over time is, as Yogananda described, we begin to experience an anguishing monotony. And when I heard those two put together, I thought, my gosh, is that an advertisement to race to the spiritual path? Because even someone who is born with a golden spoon in their mouth, after a while they get tired of the spoon in their mouth. And they wonder if maybe an emerald spoon would be, you know, a little bit more fitting for their station in life. And so on and so forth. You know, we find that after a while, even if everything is going our way, I don't know, Jaya was saying, I'm not sure if Roger Rabbit it was broadcast in India. Well, I don't know either if we got Twilight Zone here either, one of the movies. I was raised out of television. My father wouldn't have one in the house. But we secretly, when we were teenagers, of course, you know how teenagers are, snuck one in our own private room, and when he was out and about, we would watch it sometimes. But there was one episode of this Twilight Zone where there was always, you know, these things going on. And it was of this person who went to hell. And what he experienced there was something that really surprised me. Everything that he did, he was at the pool hall. And he would take a shot and all the balls would go into the slots. And he'd just kind of, you know, my goodness. And then he would, you know, do something else. And it just went perfectly. After a while, it just drove him mad. And I don't remember the final episode. I hope he didn't jump off the Golden Gate Bridge or something. Because undoubtedly, as a soul, he knew that he was just being toyed with. That even though all of these experiences he was having was seemingly perfect, he was still lacking the meaning in his heart. He was still finding the void there. And so for us, at one point in our spiritual evolution, no matter how it goes, we've had so many incarnations. I remember really being pleased when Swami said, at the end of all of our incarnations, it adds up to 0. And I thought, that's very good. I like that. I don't know why it resonated, but I thought that's fair, because I had an issue with God for a long time that he wasn't very fair. Because I was living in a teepee for about 6.5 years in the early years at Ananda, and all my friends were getting rich and having adventures and stuff. When I would go back to Manhattan Beach in Southern California, they would ask me how it was going, and I would say, well, there's lots of mice running around in my teepee, and the firewood's wet. How's it going with you? Oh, you know, we're about ready to do this and so, and I've been asked to be a journalist in Belgium. And I thought, well, gee, all I'm trying to do is survive. And so I found in the early years, for me, that I wasn't so sure if God and Guru were being so fair. Because what is this? I've given my life to God, and I can't get any sleep at night. All I'm trying to do is accumulate more shoes to throw at the raccoons. And all of that. What is this? I think maybe I'm going backwards. And I remember too, it was really, really great fun. Swami Kriyananda was at Spiritual Renewal Week, and you know, sometimes he would have questions and answers and so forth. And so this woman had a question. I just loved it to this very day. And she said, you know something, I've got a real problem, and I hope you can help me with this. My husband is just a classical beer drinker, and he watches sports all the time. And I've been doing my meditation, and I've built up to an hour, and all of these things. But he said to me the other day, and it really irritated me, he says, I'm happier than you are. I said, and she said to her, and this was the punchline, she said, and it was right, it was true. He was happier than me. And Swami, I need some help with this. And he gave the classic answer, as I remember, which is basically, for the moment, yes, okay, fine, let it go. He's loving his sports teams, and he's loving his beer and his potato chips and the couch and all of that stuff. But there's going to be a point, my dear, that if you continue to persevere, then you'll see that when he challenges you, then you can say, well, fine. That you can say whatever you want about who's the happiest in the happy competition between this little couple here. But I needn't say anything because I can feel the smile within my own heart. The tapas, the austerity that is needed on the spiritual path is real. Swami Kriyananda years ago wrote a book, Eastern Thoughts, Western Thoughts. I think it's been out of print for some time. I remember this opening page, and it said, discipline, ugh. And again, I don't know if you have that word in India, but it just means, surfing, discipline, skiing, cricket, all of this is good. The rest of this stuff, who needs it? I want to be free. And so we become, if we don't look out, even as good yogis, armchair philosophers. Where, the other ones, they have everything going for them and I don't, and so, I'll just kind of skate by. Yogananda said of Mount Washington, his headquarters, he said, there's lots of rats and mice living here on the ashram grounds, but they're not growing spiritually. And I remember Swami saying something, and I don't know why I was shocked by it. He loved to shock people. It was just fun for him from time to time. And he said that really, and he probably said it numerous times in so many different ways, but he said, you're doing everything for yourself. And of course, he said, you're a higher self, but you're doing everything for yourself. And I guess how it is with reading the autobiography of yogi, different spiritual books that we love and so on. We think, my goodness, this must be a new edition. I don't remember that part. We've read it 100 times, but finally the time is right and it jumps out at us. And I thought to myself, that's right. I'm doing everything for myself, which is to say that we are trying to aspire, as he said one time when he was lecturing Swami in Australia. This fellow raised his hand and said, I'm an atheist, what could you do for me? And so the whole crowd was riveted by this, figuring that Swami was going to say time for a water break or something. But of course he never did that. He loved these challenges. And he said, think in terms of God, because the atheist didn't know, what to do about that. Think rather of reaching for your highest potential. And in a very thick accent, which Swami did wonderfully and I can't duplicate, he said, I can live with that. And he was totally satisfied. And so whether we have a guru, or we're thinking of the possibility of having a guru, whatever it might be, know that God is the guru, as Yogananda pointed out. And for all of us, it has to be something natural. It can't be something that's force-fed. What was the last time that someone force-fed something to you? You have to do this in order to, you have to see this movie. We choke with that kind of behavior because we have to find our own way. But there does come a time, and it really is a ripeness, and it's beautiful, where we want a shortcut. We want shortcuts. We want to speed along the path. That's why Swami Kriyananda said too, when someone was asking him, do you need a guru? He says, absolutely not, you don't need a guru. But if you want God, you do. And there is that something that begins to resonate inside as we begin to introspect. and really think, how have I moved forward in my life? I was thinking the other day of my own childhood. And I was thinking, well, what if my dog Oscar, he was a big black setter. And I don't remember at the time because I was too little. But apparently I learned to walk by holding on to Oscar. And he didn't run away, and he didn't bite me, and he wasn't irritated. Very sweet dog. And what if Oscar hadn't been around? You know, would have it taken me a few more months to learn how to walk? I love that memory, although again, I don't have it myself, but from my parents. And so, what a simple little thing. You know, I learned to walk because of my dog. So for us, when you think about it, and as I was thinking about my own life, there's so many instances, as a matter of fact, it's nonstop, where this person helps you, and that person helps you, and so forth and so on, until finally there really comes an implosion, where you realize, all of this help, I wonder if it's speaking to me about a certain something. I wonder if it's speaking to me in this way, that there are people that are more along the path than I. As Swami Kriyananda simply said, it was so sweet. People would put him on a pedestal and all, and he would say, no. I'm just a brother on the path, and if anything, I've just been at it longer. I thought, wow. Now, that is a comment for the ages. So, at one point, after we've been at it long enough, we begin to think in terms of, are there any experts around? If we were to all come up here, which would be a real joy, to share, various things about our spiritual path, there would be no doubt that point that would be so vivid in our minds, that book, that person, that really, really changed our lives. And when we think of a soul that has been at it a long, long time, to the point where they've reached perfection, they're no longer striving. They've arrived. It's just that simple. I love the thought, which I heard years ago at Ananda, we're all half-baked saints. And I thought, that's very good, at least half-baked. You know, it could have been a little less. It could have been, we're all 1/60th baked saints. And we'd say, well, gee, that's good, but I wonder, and so forth. Half-baked, we would have to be that in order to begin to want an inner life. And so the magnetism gets stronger and stronger, our own desire. We begin to call on God with real soul force. And when that happens, then the Guru appears. There's so many sweet stories, and one of my favorites, I don't know how Jaya got along without his water. I often say it's thirsty work up here. Any of you that are public speakers, perhaps you can relate. There's some fun stories about the Guru coming into people's lives. This was another Swami. He was speaking in, I think he was at the Bodhi Tree, a well-known landmark in Los Angeles, bookstore. And he was talking about when the time is ripe, the Guru appears. And so right at this time, you think it's a coincidence, hardly. Right at this time, there was a picture of Sai Baba behind the wall of this man sitting here. And this man was wondering himself if Sai Baba was his Guru. Right at that time when Swami said, when the time is ripe, the Guru appears, the picture fell off the wall and landed face up in the guy's lap. I thought, wow, very, very good. And that, along with all of the library books over the years, autobiography, I've heard many a times, falling on people's heads as they are looking for, their direction. And they think, well, gee, this may be a sign, as they rub their head, and the point comes through. And so there's many, many different ways that we begin, whether we are disciples already in deepening our attunement and growing our attunement, or beginning to warm up to the possibility of, is this something that is meant for me as well? And it really is a matter of relaxing, which then begins to help us become more receptive, which then grows that attunement. But again, as long as we understand that it's nothing that would be forced. There's many reasons to love God, and there's many reasons to love the Guru. And one of them is that God and Guru simply, they're just happy with us as we are. And I think to myself, wow, that unconditional love is unfathomable. That the love of the Guru and the love of God is so mighty, is so infinite, that they even love half-baked saints. One time Swami said to Yogananda, Yogananda had made the statement that there's many saints that are here with me. And so Swami was very curious. He was very intellectual at the time, and so he was always asking questions of Yogananda. And so he said, well, gee, some of the disciples just, they don't seem to be, very kind and, have, fits perhaps of anger. And Yogananda said, well, they're fallen saints. I thought, interesting. They're still saints, but they're fallen saints. But enough magnetism to make it then to the ashram. There was one, he might have been a fallen saint too. He was so outrageous in his behavior that Yogananda bodily threw him out. Well, the guy wasn't happy with that. And he had closed the gate and all of that, and he started to push his way back in. And I guess he was a strong man and got in again. Well, Yogananda was there guarding the gate and threw him out again. And threw him out a third time. And finally, Yogananda, he liked that spunk and enthusiasm. He says, okay, in he goes. And I thought, wow, how can you not love that? You read the stories of the saints, you read the stories of the gurus, and you never know what they're going to do. When I was at Mount Washington years ago, Yogananda's headquarters, I met a man. And he said, I knew Yogananda. Oh, well, of course, disciples love to hear that. I said, oh, and I was just all ears. And he said, I was an electrician at Mount Washington. And so, there were many different times when the Guru would be there and so on. And he said, oh, he was smart. And I said, well, yeah. So I took that in. I didn't know where he was going. And he said, yeah, and also he was a very good cook. I thought, well, yeah, that's wonderful too. But that was the end of the statement. He made a few statements. He was smart. He was a good cook. And then I guess we were talking about the weather after that because I couldn't get any more out of him. But I reflected that Master had said, no one crosses my path except for a reason. And so the great ones, God himself, the great saints, they're in, as Yogananda said, for the long haul. And so no doubt Yogananda was feeding this electrician who thought he was smart and a good cook. Maybe he even made him a meal, you never know, in order to move him along spiritually on his path. There's a classic story, Brother Turiyananda, he's passed now. He was the one who saved me in the early years when I was looking for Ananda. And I didn't know where it was because I didn't know where it existed. And Jai and I were raised in the same neighborhood, and he got to Ananda faster than I did. I should be mad at him for that. I got in the path at 68, in 1968, but I didn't know that Ananda existed. Jaya wasn't that far away from me. I should have had the intuition to say, excuse me, Jaya, but I'm going to be meeting you fairly soon. Could you give me, I wouldn't mind, if you could kind of like, tell me at least how it's going, And, but he didn't for some reason. And so, as it worked out, I would go to Lake Shrine, which saved me. Any of you that have been on pilgrimage to Los Angeles, of course, highly recommend. And we have a whole batch of Indians that were there just recently, had an incredible time. And so Lake Shrine was a property that was acquired by Yogananda in the last years of his life. He said, this is the showcase of my work. And he had all the monks go and bathe in the lake there. And he said, this is holy water now. And you walk into Lake Shrine, and it has so much power. And so I would talk to one of the monks, Turiyananda, and he was a very, very outspoken monk. I don't even know why he was able to stay there. One time he said to me, he said, I've been trying to get boots, but everything has to be, from up top, So I asked for boots months ago, but they haven't arrived. So what I did is I left, and I was a bricklayer for 2 days. He was the monk supposed to stay in the ashram, but he left for 2 days, made some money as a bricklayer. He was skilled. And then he got his boots. But later he said, I got into trouble. So that was Brother Turiyananda. And Swami brought him on the path. And very, very beautiful soul. And so during that particular time, I don't know if Turiyananda told this story or not, but it's a true classic. He was a highly advanced soul. As a matter of fact, he's passed on now. But I heard that there at this windmill, which was the chapel there at Lake Shrine, he lived in the upper room. And one day, I don't know who found him, no doubt one of the monks, he was sitting in meditation. There was a smile on his face. He had left. It's very possible he left consciously. Well, in the early years prior to finding that Yogananda was his guru, he went to Swami Ramdas. Perhaps some of you have heard of him, the South Indian saint. And Ramdas, he visited on a world tour, Mount Washington, and Swami Kriyananda had met him, and he said to him, "How are you doing?" And Ramdas said, "Swimmingly." That was exactly how he was doing. You look at his face and you can hardly believe he's of this planet. Such radiance. And so Turiyananda met Swami Ramdas when I believe, maybe it was in Los Angeles. And Turiyananda at that time, prior to being on the path, was wondering who his guru was. And so Ramdas, of course, as a saint, intuitively said, well, Yogananda's your guru. And Turiyananda says, no, Yogananda's dead. This was, sometime in the mid-50s, Yogananda had passed. And Ramdas came up with the classic response. He says, no, Yogananda's alive, you're dead. And Turiyananda, in meeting him, went into samadhi in meeting Ramdas. So again, he just felt naturally, my goodness, this is an incredible experience. You must be my guru. No, your guru is Yogananda. We don't know how these things come to us. There's no question about it. There's tremendous good karma. Sometimes there's a warming up process. I remember Roma telling me when this was before coming to Ananda, she bought the autobiography of a yogi, and this is not the first time I've heard this type of story. And so she got the book, and she put it on her altar, and then she meditated with it. And it was some time later, if I got the story right, that then she, began to read it, and so forth. Everyone has different ways of approaching the guru. It can be just meeting a friend and seeing such an incredible change. Whereas before, months, maybe years before, they were always getting into trouble, perhaps not landing into jail, but, all kinds of mischief. And now all of a sudden, there's a change in them that is absolutely border miraculous, if not a miracle itself. And so one begins to see, and Swami used to tease that when people know to change, that they think that you've changed your breakfast cereal. It's a bit superficial. But those that go further in and really gaze into their eyes say, what are you doing? When we were batchmates, all we could do was get into trouble, and how we passed, I don't know. But now I see something that is very, very stirring to me. I'm just moved by who you are now. You're so calm. What have you done? And so then the story comes out. Well, I have met a saint, or I've read a book. Here in India, I've often said that I feel that India is a saint factory. And there's so many saints, my God. Where do we even start? But the incredible thing about the saints is there's no competition. And I like to tease that at the end of the day, Ramakrishna and Yogananda don't sit down for tea and say, well, how many disciples did you get today? And Ramakrishna says, well, it was a good day, I got 500. And Yogananda looks down and takes a sip of his tea and says, well, gee, I only got 175. Well, better luck next time, and so on. There's none of that. None of that. God is the guru. That's why we can be secure in that. God is the guru, but he works through instruments. And so there are those instances where we will initially find someone who is near and dear to us, but then all of a sudden there's this shift. And we think, oh my goodness, I've got to be loyal and so forth. But the loyalty has to be first to God. And in school, if we are changed to a different classroom, we're still going to love that teacher. If mid-year something happens and we go to another classroom, we're not going to put up perhaps a big fight for too long. Okay, fine. This I've heard is a good math instructor too. Then let me be gracious and go to that classroom and I will learn. And so we find that even in the mere contemplation of having someone that is wiser than us, that having someone that we feel really, very likely has arrived, that we begin to find that, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe I'm ready. There was this lady, such a sweet experience she had, where her male figures in her life were unpleasant. And so, yet she was drawn, and where's the ladies? It's all a bunch of men. Oh my God, here it goes again. We're recycling into the same thing. I finally find something meaningful for me, and it's men again. And so she told me after the fact, she said, I had to talk with Yogananda. And I said, listen, I've got a real problem here. And I said, whatever, the father, the brother, the cousin, who knows, a truckload of males or something, I have no idea, maybe just one, had created, a lot of turmoil in her life. And she said to the guru, I really can't even think about becoming a disciple unless you will be my mother. If you will be my mother, then I'm very happy to become a disciple, but I've had enough of men. And she felt that inner sanction, that inner smile in the heart. And with that, then she became a disciple. And I thought, wow, what a unique story that you would face, all of these males and then say, I can't deny the attraction. It is there. It is real. I know it's real. But could one of you be my mother? And there it was. Yes. And so for all of us, it's an absolutely fascinating journey. Whether the book hits us on the head, I should one of these days have a raise of hands. Maybe I'd be astonished. How many got on the path by having Yogananda's autobiography fall on their head in half the room, I wouldn't be surprised because God works through miracles. And it is a miracle. I think of this often, perhaps on a daily basis, that we, all of us, whether disciples or not, are beginning more and more to prize life, the true life, the life of growth, the life of growing magnetism, the life of attunement. We're prizing it more and more so that we're beginning to experience a true polar shift. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. As most people say, well, that sounds good, and when I'm 80, I'm going to take that to heart. But I like the things first. So, God, as Yogananda said, if you do 10% of what I ask you, you'll get there. So I like that teaching. So what I'm going to do is I'll go after things, and then after, again, the grandkids have graduated with their master's degree, then I'll start working on this project, this God stuff. But there's no need to wait. We can do that now, and we will be supported, and we will be loved, and we'll be encouraged with all of our efforts. Yogananda said, I see you all as light. You are all so beautiful. That's the vision of the great saints. That's how they see us. How many people see us in that way? Friends do a fairly good job. Of course, with satsang, you see, again, so much beauty around in the faces, the eyes, and so forth. But when you think of the saints and what they reflect back, it is truly astonishing, because what they see is real. And at this point in our spiritual development, it's a mixed bag. One moment it's a pretty good day, and so here we're seeing this friend of ours or the neighbor as God. You think, oh, it's so beautiful, so sweet. And the next day they don't please us that much, and they're not gods anymore. We don't even know if they have a soul. And so we have this up and down journey until finally there is that point of equilibrium where we have such a strong feeling inside that we must accelerate. We must, and we begin to dream the dream of dreams, that we could be free in this life. Swami Kriyananda, I forget if he was saying this all along, maybe he was. Jaya can tell you after the break. But basically it was this: go after Nirvikalpa Samadhi this life. What is Nirvikalpa Samadhi? It's final freedom. Then if we come back of our own choice, instead of being thrown down, Who wants to go down to earth? We think, well, gee, I don't want to. Tough. Your karma now dictates you're down again. And I often think we go to the clothes rack to see, okay, which costume are you going to wear? Let's see. I guess I'll have this personality. Yogananda used to say when he was to don a personality, again, as a free soul, this was awkward for him. He says it's kind of like a hot overcoat on a hot day. It's kind of itchy. But he says, after a while I get used to it. And so no doubt we too have had that experience, without a doubt, many, 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 many times where we think, my goodness, there I am in the astral world, but it's a blessing to come here. Why? Because this is like quicksand. There's such inertia here. It takes so much effort. Swami Kriyananda used to say from time to time, people would go to Hawaii and he went himself too. And he would say, oh, it's wonderful, it's, the tropics there and so on, but it's not easy to grow there spiritually, because everything is so perfect. Where you come down to this earth and you have to be careful not to be judgmental. This crowd and, over here and there, I almost fell over here and, in this crack in the road and on. Whereas in the astral world, apparently in some regions, there's not even insects. Wow, sounds good. Those of us that are always walking around with insect spray, we think, when is it time to finally get to the astral world? Count me in, get me out of here. So, for us, it's a matter of having growing reverence for the journey. Growing reverence, if we have that blessing of having a guru, the greatest blessings of the saints say, of all blessings that can be had in this world. If we have that blessing, great. Deepen it. And we don't have to go around, banging people over the head. My poor parents, when I first got on the path, I don't know how they were able to stand it. Every 5 minutes I'd say, oh, that reminds me of a story of Yogananda. And finally, my mother, we were in the car, and I guess it was just too much. The atmosphere was getting thick with, as we used to call her, maybe it was Swami Yogananda fever. And so it's like, oh yeah, I remember a story. And she turned to me, and she loved Yogananda too. My father and she in their later years went to Lake Shrine every weekend and would walk hand in hand around the lake. But at one point, I forgot what she said, but boy, she was a fiery Jewish Leo. And she turned back and, one of those mother bear growls. And it was just that I was overdoing, apparently, And so I learned that needed lesson. And the letters that I would send back to them, oh my gosh. After she passed, I found a big stack of them. I couldn't even read them. I just thought, God, it must have tortured them to death. Every single letter. I used to call myself Johnny Monk. I was a monk for many years. And I just thought, this bundle is a good stack. And she kept them, God knows why. I said, this goes to the fireplace. And I didn't read one of them. I just thought, they were tortured. That's enough. I don't need to be tortured again by what I put them through. We have enthusiasm, no doubt. We have this desire to help change other people. But people need to change in their own way. And that is an aspect of Ananda that I really prize, that there is this very, very sweet, wherever you are, fine. If you are very enthusiastic about this saint or that saint, God bless you. You're very fortunate. Though we have wonderful enthusiasm for our own path, we know that truly it's only to help people move to their next step. And in that way, people don't feel threatened. When we were out in corporations teaching meditation, we didn't know quite what to think about that. We had to change the terminology in self, not God, higher self, etc., etc. But it was so sweet, because what were we talking about? We were just talking about what everyone knew already, because it's nothing new. We already know it. It's a matter of recognizing that truth. So we were talking about meditation and this and that, but we found in that particular environment such sweetness, because people were working long hours and putting out tremendous amounts of energy, but still you could see the soul was in charge. They were upright and smiling. And so I often said to Dharmaraj, in so many ways, we should be paying them. They shouldn't be paying us. What an inspiration that they are. And so again, as I said earlier, we have many gurus. We really do. But there is at one point that one guru that comes. God sends that guru in response to this growing yearning in the heart that creates a magnetism that God himself cannot resist. And when that experience happens, then that's it. I really feel that when the guru arrives finally and we recognize that this is the time, that basically we're done. I like to have the image at that point, we're at the Greyhound bus station, and we found the Greyhound bus station and we're just waiting for it to come in. Because it takes an enormous amount of blessing and good karma to get to that point where we really, really want to move along speedily. So be happy with where you are, because you're in a good place. And you've worked very, very hard to get there. Yes, deepen our experience. Yes, broaden our horizons, open our heart. Do all that you can. And then trust in God that when the time is right, he will take you to freedom. When the time is right, he will deepen our attunement with our guru. When the time is right, he will give us a guru. And so we're going to take a water break now. And remember, as we like to say, this is an American water break, which is to say, 5 minutes or so. Not an Indian water break, especially in this environment where one could go find the fish pond and so on, and come back for lunch, of course, but you would miss wonderful things that Dharmarajan is about to share. So, 5 minutes or so, Roma will be monitoring, And so I don't think I need to say any more than that. I think that ought to pretty much tie it up in a nice little bow. So God bless you all. I have a little bit of water break, 5 minutes or so, and come on back and continue on with our discussion on this very important topic of magnetism.